Good morning, everyone. We have the great pleasure of having Professor Kuntala Lahiri-Dutt here with us to deliver a talk on social coal, finding life in fossil fuel. Professor Kuntala Lahiri-Dutt is a professor at the Australian National University, Crawford School of Public Policy, ANU College of Asia and the Pacific. She has over 30 years of experience on the challenges of livelihood in developing countries. Her research has mainly been on the social and ecological aspects of resources. It has encompassed both large and industrial mining, informal and artisanal mining, then water resource management, feminization of agriculture in rural communities. Her research has impacted subsequent generations of researchers as well, and her work has been used by both international and grassroots level development organizations. Professor Lahiri-Dutt has extensive work experience in South Asian countries, Indonesia, Lao PDR, Papua New Guinea, and Mongolia. Currently, her research is on the global coal sector transition and how it can be made gender just instead of having disproportionate burden on women with a focus on the global south. Now, I would invite Professor Lahiri-Dutt to deliver her talk.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that introduction. I have prepared a PowerPoint, which I will now, the host has to enable my share screen ability. So if the host is Kranti, would you please allow me to share the screen? So look, I'm really pleased to be talking in this gathering. I really appreciate that all of you have come so early. I know that it is really early on in India, and to come at that time is this time to listen to somebody's talk. So yes, I realize that my talk better be interesting, otherwise I'll get the flack from you. Let me start with a little bit of my background. So before joining the ANU, I used to teach in the University of Burdwan, and it was just in my backyard was this Raniganj coal mining area, and I did an extensive research, for several years on Raniganj coal mining area, Raniganj, and then extended to Jharia and North Karanpura, in Jharkhand, where new coal mining mines were coming in. So I have seen the impact of old coal mining regions. So Raniganj is a very old coal mining region where extensively urbanized, where agriculture is totally dead and or nearly dead. And then Jharkhand is move over westward through to Jharia to North Karanpura. You would gradually see that mining is expanding into what used to be forested tract, undulating hilly areas, and often inhabited by indigenous communities. So the issues that that I studied in Raniganj, and the issues that are emerging in, or that started to emerge in in the 90s in Jharkhand, were quite different. But that was my I would say that I was fortunate enough to study how things are shaping up. So it made me very deeply interested in coal mining. And I realized that coal mining has a long history of coal. So coal within India has, you can imagine that it has traveled through this time. And, you can start from thinking about coal's beginning as a fossil fuel. Originally all these trees that were covered by sediments millions of years ago, for millions of years, they remained underneath the land and solidified and fossilized, turned into coal, this organic carbon material. But for within India, there is also this idea of coal being discovered. So, India is look at temperate, tropical country, I'm sorry. It's a hot country, people do not need additional heat. But when the British had come to India, colonized India, they knew the use of coal because coal to them was important to keep their houses warm, to boil water and to keep the houses warm. So two English administrators, walking around in Raniganj area along the banks of the Damodar, they are supposedly, uh, s- they found coal. Actually, some people might have been, they have dug up some coal in a wintry night. They were, burning that coal to warm themselves, and so the coal was discovered that way. I'm sorry for just switching the slide. So coal mining started during the colonial times, and by 1930s, and look at the Coalfields Committee report that came out in 1931, it, they the rulers realized that coal is a national asset. The idea of coal became very important. Coal became central to the development of the country, to the well being of its people. So, if any of you have traveled from Calcutta to the coal mining areas, the train that you have taken is even called the Black Diamond Express. So coal is truly a diamond to the Indian psyche. It is so important that no other mineral, gold or valuable mineral, uranium, is given that status. So coal has, imagine, from being discovered by the colonial rulers to becoming this, coal has moved through a lot of, moved through time and gradually acquired that, pride of place. And obviously, as you can imagine, that pride of place is expressed in this whole maze of legal framework that we have created around coal. So Indian Mines Act of 1952, basically that, let us put that act aside because it just looks after the factory, sort of labor, safety, etc. But MMDR and MCDR, it's another variation. These are the acts that sort of divide, that are important for mineral or mining in India. They classify the minerals into major and minor, and coal has been given the, obviously, as you can imagine, it was given the status of a major mineral. So what is a major mineral? That means only big boys, big companies can dig coal. So remember that, we will come, it will become evident to you later why I am talking about that. And there is another act that doesn't get talked too often, is Coal Bearing Areas Act, CBAA, which was passed after Indian independence, which was, which was passed to, just look at that, to establish greater public control. Public here is not, as we say, public, general public. Public is the state. Greater state control over the coal mining industry and its development, provided for the acquisition by the state of unworked land containing coal deposits or of rights in or over such lands. So if coal occurs under your land, all other, things become secondary. CBAA takes precedence. Okay, so the whole idea of indigenous people's land being inalienable, because Chotanagpur, comes under CNTA, Chotanagpur, Land Act and PESA Act, where you are not supposed to take over the land that is owned by indigenous people, right? But coal bearing areas act is something that is the critical instrument, and that we talk a lot about land acquisition act and how it has been revised as a result of activists protesting against that act, but Coal Bearing Areas Act has not. So coal also, come to the next bullet point then, coal also represents the jobs, the unions, the nationalization, urbanization, everything. You know, imagine all our union movements, they started from coal mines. The idea of nationalizing the coal mines also came from the unions who were clamoring for greater safety for the workers. And there is also extensive urbanization that takes place around coal mining area. But one thing, only one other country had a separate ministry for coal, and that is the United Kingdom. At the peak of Industrial Revolution, when Industrial Revolution was absolutely swaying in you know, United Kingdom's society and economy, that was when they needed a Ministry of Coal. But in India, we have a separate ministry. Not for, coal does not come under the energy portfolio. It is a separate ministry for coal, and that gives you an idea about the importance of coal for Indians. And in since 1992, as you know, Indian government has been trying to deregulate and privatize the coal mining industry, and quite a lot of licenses have been given. There's scams, etc. I'm not going into that. And now it's a very critical moment when I'm talking to you, because in the last 2 months or 3 months, I have spoken in at least three workshops with Delhi-based excuse me, organizations who are talking about just transition. It is an idea that energy, we have to decarbonize. There is an energy transition already happening throughout the world, and India will also have to decarbonize itself. So, which means India will have to decoal, basically, get out of this obsession, of with coal, but at the same time provide justice. Now this word justice and just transition has come to us from Europe. ILO has given this idea, come out with this idea, and Paris Climate Accord also recognize that energy transition will have to be just. But how do we ensure justice, and to whom, we do not know. And that's what I am going to talk to you about, and through my talk. It's one part of my talk. So let's look at the next slide. So we have talked about how coal moves through time. Different times have given coal different interpretations. But coal also travels through a lot of social and economic spaces. As I have said in my abstract, imagine the coal that is being mined in Raniganj or Jharkhand, and when I press the switch of the electric switch and the light comes on, that's the ultimate product. There is a long journey that coal travels. The diagram that you're seeing, I call it really political economic lesson in political economy 101. So we know that nature and humans co-constitute a material. We no longer look at a material as an purely natural thing. We know that human beings, human hands is always, human ideas, human thinking is recreating and reshaping that material thing. And similarly, coal, when it is lying on the river bank, for the indigenous people to just warm themselves, burn and warm themselves, and when it is being dug to be taken to the thermal power plant to be converted into electricity, that is being supplied to the urban homes and industries. That is a very big transformation, a very big change, and that's how coal is being co-constituted by both humans and nature. But human beings are also adding value to that material through their labor. And that is how that, the commodity, the thing that we are digging up, it is becoming a material that is of use. That, as I say, the river bank, the stuff that was lying on the Damodar river bank is of no use to us. But as soon as we know that it can be uh, turned into electricity, it becomes a valuable material for us. And then we begin to add value to it. And then we also extract surplus out of it to turn it into a commodity. So when we sell it, that's how it turns into a commodity. So through this process, coal's meaning is changing, right? And that's what I wanted to talk about. And in India, we talk about the formal sector and unorganized sector, that as though it's not unorganized. Or we have also learnt about formal sector and the informal sector, as though they're these running parallel to each other, never the twins shall meet, that sort of economy. But the way we think about the economy is only tip of the economy, what we see, and an economy is organized by not only transactions, the monetary transactions and so on, but it is also organized by the labor and enterprise. We know that these are the three pillars of an economy. But look at this, that each of these three pillars, transactions, labor and enterprise, also have alternative components, to uh, that are non-market transactions, unpaid labor, and non-capitalist enterprises. I'll give you one example. This became very evident during COVID and lockdown. The idea of care economy, unpaid work, the work that women or domestic help do in our homes, that's really part of that non-market transaction. It's sometimes these, we do not see them as part of the economy because they are non-monetized, right? But they are the ones that actually build up the economy. So to explain this, a colleague of ours, it's actually two people created a joint persona. Julie Graham and Catherine Gibson created the joint persona J.K. Gibson Graham. And they call this economy as a diverse economy. They say that you can read their quote from their book. They say that the economy is a very big stuff, and like an iceberg. They compare it with an iceberg. And the tip, as you know, when the iceberg flows in water, we can see only the tip of that iceberg. And much of the iceberg is underneath the water, invisible, unseen. So they talk about care economy, all these various forms of transactions. People give gifts to each other. These are the ways that the economy is comprised, and people do stuff, activists organizing protests. Why do they do that? For a monetary gain? No, there is no fiscal exchange happening. They're just doing it because they believe in something. So that's why they're talking about the economy being not just one or two, formal and informal. They say it's a diverse economy, multiple types of production and activities going on within the economy that we need to know about. So this is my theoretical framing of what I'm going to talk to you about. So I in my research, I found that there is not really a one coal economy in India. Of course, we think about the coal mining industry in India, we think about Coal India Limited. That's the big state-owned mining company producing coal, nationalized coal. So nationalized company, so I call it national coal. So the coal they are producing, we can call it national coal. Okay, just for the heck of it. But then there are also captive collieries, which are captive because their production, their entire production goes to thermal power plants. So these captive collieries that have been allocated to private entrepreneurs since uh, opening up of the economy, deregulation of the economy under the neoliberal economic policy, we can call it neoliberal coal then. So this is the privately mined coal going to thermal power plants, which we are calling neoliberal coal. So we can describe both these two economies as formal economies because they are all formal, keep records, they give salaries, monthly salaries or whatever, etc. But then there are also informal economies. So what are these two informal economies? The two informal economies are non-legal coal mines. Here, I must say that illegality and informality are sort of often conflated, and then illegality is presented as a law and order problem, an enforcement problem. But think about it. Meghalaya was given a special status under the Indian constitution. It's called the sixth scheduled state. If you read up, then you will see what is the definition of a sixth scheduled state. The definition is that the local people will own the resources that lie under their land or on the land. So that means forests and the minerals are owned by local people, indigenous people. Okay. And who will give the mining rights? The local district council, which is dominated by the indigenous um, communities. So Meghalaya was brought under the Indian constitution. It was absolutely a genius statecraft move by Jawaharlal Nehru at that time. And given that special status under Indian constitution allowed Meghalaya's entry into India. But now, after all this, now let us go back, think about major and minor mineral. Major minerals can be dug by big companies, I said that, right? So how's these district councils giving license to local people? Come on, how can it be justified? It is not justified, right? We can see that there is a conflict between the two laws here. CBAA says that all the coal that lies under the land is belongs to the state and is used for development purposes. But here we see indigenous people are digging their coal and selling it across the border to Bangladesh. So this is I call it a non-legal situation because it's not illegal really. It's a situation where absolutely law has created a conflicting, situation, a hole, through which Meghalaya has fallen through the crack, through that hole. But then it is not only statecraft coal, but there is also subsistence or survival coal, which is being produced by, if you go by local people, really go from leave Raniganj and travel in a car westwards towards Ranchi, and you will begin to see, hundreds of people carrying coal in bicycles. And recently they have started carrying coal in motorcycles as well. So this is what I call subsistence coal or survival coal. I carried out studies with these people and found that they earn 150 to 200 rupees per day, which is not much. And it's quite an uncertain, quite an arduous work to cut this coal. And yeah, and some, continuously in the media, by the state, by the district administrators, the problem of these village mines, is presented as an enforcement problem. It's an illegal coal that is a problem of enforcement. So this is giving you an idea of the diverse nature of Indian coal mining industry. Just for a break, I'm going to show you some photographs and then come to the main points. So this photograph is from Meghalaya. This photograph is from uh, between Raniganj and Jharia on a coal track. The local village boys, they jump up when the wagon trains pass, they jump up on the wagon trains and then they throw away this coal. And then at night, trucks come and collect this coal. So from one village area, just to give you an idea about the extent of this, of this kind of pilferage, from one village area, 40 trucks leave at night. So each truck, if they carry 7 tons, you can easily calculate how much through the length of that railway track, how much coal is being pilfered from the wagons. So this is a village mine, in away from the highways in Raniganj area, where the panchayat knows that these people are digging. Coal was found under somebody's land, and they started to dig it as a large scale. So it's quite a, as you can see, an extensive affair that's happening here. So here the story is a little different. Here the Coal India Limited was digging a big hole for an open cut mine. And what happened is they were going for the thick coal seam underneath. And but on the side there was a narrow coal seam. So it was like a bowl, right? When they were digging, an open cut mine is like a bowl. And they cut this bowl, but the narrow coal seam became exposed on the side. The narrow coal seams was not the target of Coal India Limited. So local people came in and they started to dig. As you can see, they have created a little, so actual coal mine where Coal India is operating is way below. It's at the bottom of the bowl, but on the side of the bowl, this is what is happening. So it reminds you of how formal and informal are really very closely linked together. You know, so it reminds me of kind of a relationship. You would see that. Have you seen the how the bullocks, big bullocks roam on an agricultural field, and little sparrows come and then they pick little insects from the horns of those bullocks. So it's something like that, really. So these are the little sparrows, the local people who are digging a little bit of coal from the side, narrow seams on the side. And then this transportation, you can see various means of transportation. Of course, transportation, we do not know which one is legal coal, so I won't show you transportation photo, but yes, this rickshaws and women as well digging coal. So and cycles, and there's so many cycles photos available nowadays on the online, so I don't want to show you that. So let us have a look at different coal economies. So I'm just giving you a warning, these diagrams are a little dated. Okay, so the study, when I did it, Coal India Limited was producing 450 million tons of coal, so which is about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 years ago. So, and then there is also captive, Coal India Limited, I call it national coal, 450 million tons. Captive collieries are producing about 50 million tons, which is neoliberal coal. And non-legal coal is about 5 million tons, which is coming from Meghalaya. And illegal coal, which is, I did an estimation. So this is not a guesstimate. I actually stood and counted and surveyed and came to the conclusion that by extrapolating that about 15 million tons of coal is survival coal in India. Now, let us look at the number of people that are employed in these coal economies. So Coal India Limited, now that figure has come down after giving rampant, sacking people and giving them voluntary redundancies. But at that time, it was 370,000 people on their website. So Coal India Limited at that time said that we are hiring 370 million tons of thousands, 370,000 people. And captive collieries, the rough estimation was 60,000. Illegal coal mining, which is informal coal mining, the subsistence type mining, that is 400,000. And non-legal coal mining in Meghalaya, that hires about 100,000. But if you look at CIL, how it produces the coal, what is the 370,000 people doing? Coal India Limited actually subcontracts 50% of their work to contractors. Excuse me. So the contractors are local people, local, local mafia, local big bosses, political leaders who are taking the contract, who are removing the overburden and hiring local people who might have been displaced from agriculture or their traditional lands. Excuse me. So we talk about formal and informal as two separate things. And I said that it's impossible, right? Here is another example why it is impossible. Coal India Limited gives recognition to 370,000 people, but there are contractors and they are daily wage laborers who are working for these contractors. And they're producing 50% of the coal and they are hiring a very large number of people. And I have given a very conservative estimate of 180,000. It would be a lot more. Now, captive collieries, I did not do the study, how much work they outsource, but it would be like that. They would have outsourced even more than Coal India Limited. And that sector would employ quite a lot of people as well. So this is the reality of the numbers of human lives that are involved in coal mining in India. It's not just the employees in Coal India Limited, but also the wage workers, the contractors workers, the non-legal people in Meghalaya and their various, Nepalese migrant workers who are working there, and the informal, the subsistence coal miners throughout from Raniganj to Ranchi. So we know that, okay, this is all theory. Let's move away from this. This is the jargon. This is the way we talked about coal mining in India so far. This is all framed in a, a, a critique of neoliberal development, all these things. You can see that this is all based on human rights. So far, we talked about human rights because people were being displaced by coal mines were advancing and so on. But we are now faced with a future in which there is a possibility of coal mines shutting down, and we have not thought about it yet. So that is where we are going, decarbonization, and coal mines will be closed. Can we even imagine? Imagine the Ministry of Coal having to deal with decarbonization and the impending future of coal mine closure. That entire ministry will have to go. Think about that. So we know that we have to We are addicted to fossil fuel. We are addicted to the way we have created an infrastructure in the last, you know, 7, 8, last 100 years, I would say, intense fossil fuel use. We have to move away from that. We have to decarbonize. We have to get rid of that addiction and move to renewable energies. So, what is the idea? The idea of just transition, as I said, has been proposed in this context by ILO to protect the workers, to make sure that the communities that are reliant on coal do not suffer unnecessarily, that they have a way to survive. Now, just when we talk about just transition, what kind of justice are we talking about? As you know very well that there are four kinds of justice: uh, procedural justice, distributive justice, which is who gets what, everyone gets equally, and retributive justice, and which is punishment, and restorative justice, which means that we come back to a situation where we understand that some mistakes were made, and we sort of working towards ameliorating its negative impacts. So the idea of justice can be used in different contexts. It can be used in social context. It can be used in environmental context as well. Environmental justice. Now we are talking about energy justice as well, that everyone gets access to. In India, imagine we are talking about energy justice, which is a kind of a mix of environmental and social justice, right? Because we still have about 200 million people who do not have access to electricity, who do not have proper access to electricity, more than 200 million. Currently, access to electricity is defined as one electric bulb in the house. And as you know, that's not enough, and very few people have that kind of access. So we're talking about energy justice, in which, and energy justice also includes what kind of cooking fuel do women use, and so on. So we have a long way to go. We're still talking about energy justice, but now we are being hit by this tsunami wave of idea of social justice. So as I said, let me go back. This is all social justice, okay? This on this slide, when you look at how people talk about, the injustices perpetrated by the mining industry, that is social justice idea. But when we are thinking about transitioning towards a decarbonized future, what would be that social justice? What is social justice? So, social justice is essentially based on the idea of redistribution of power, that we redistribute the power. And there are five principles: access to resources, equity, diversity, participation, and human rights. So, think about all we can't, the government stops Meghalaya coal mining. How can it stop it? Because it undermines the political sovereignty of a state, and it undermines the very reason of its being part of Indian federal political structure. You get my point? So it becomes essentially a complicated matter for India to even think about just transition. So imagine the indigenous communities who have been displaced by coal mining in Jharkhand, who are now have resorted to, illegally, or, digging for coal, informally digging for coal and selling it to the various, brick kilns and tea stalls and local towns and so on. How would you provide a livelihood to those millions of people who are digging coal without, I mean, forget about people who are holding salaried jobs. There is this big informal sector, diverse. Within the diverse economic framework, we know that there are these, survival coal, there is this statecraft goal, which we also have to think about transitioning. So the challenge in India would be enormous. Challenge to India and to young people like you is to get this decarbonization, get to the belly of the beast, understand the decarbonization debate and how, where it is going in the global north, and then bring it to the global south and change it. Because the way when ILO talks about protecting the workers, they think about the formal sector workers. When ILO guys come to India and sit in Delhi to meet with people, or IPCC people, experts, talk to the energy experts in India, they are thinking about the formal sector workers. They are thinking about people who are working in Coal India Limited or for the various private companies. They're getting a monthly salary. They are not thinking about this what they want to do and think about their human rights. So the consequences is not only of decarbonization would not only be this, for the workers, but also for the coal reliant communities, which I have talked about, the regional economies that we need to consider. And we have to reinvigorate the regional economies and reimagine a future that would be, that is possible for India. So before I end, I will just talk about one, academic researcher's view. So I have been very impressed by one book. It's called Carbon Democracy, written by Timothy Mitchell. And you know what he says? He says that when coal came into existence, coal brought with it not just the physical infrastructure, that of transporting coal, the wagons, the overhead, the buckets, I have forgotten the name of it. Anyway, so, and the trains and the thermal power plants and all that. It also created its social and political infrastructure. It gave rise to this working class movement, the idea of the working class, created the trade union movement, and so on. But when petroleum came, it's in the nature of the commodity. It's the materiality of the commodity. The nature of fossil fuel was such that it gave rise to the centralized control, to more dictators. And, you think about petroleum producing countries, the picture will become quite clear immediately in your mind. So coal gave rise to one kind of social and political infrastructure. Petroleum gave rise to another type of social and political infrastructure. And now Timothy Mitchell is saying that we are making a huge move. Energy transition, we are actually experiencing a revolution within our lifetime. And that revolution is moving away from fossil fuel, decarbonizing our economies and moving towards renewable, sustainable forms of energy. And you know what? This type of production, the way the wind energy and solar energy work is very different. They are by their very nature, can be produced in a very decentralized manner. You know, the town I live in, Canberra, it's a town where if you walk around the various neighborhoods, various localities, you would see that almost every house has, a large amount of solar panels. We are all producing solar energy, and that solar energy is going to the grid, and then the retail energy retail company is distributing to us in a uneven manner. So Mitchell is saying that, talking about carbon, this is our opportunity to create a carbon democratic world, decarbonized world, which is democratic in the true sense of its term, where production is decentralized, where communities are participating in the electricity production, energy production, and where their voices are being heard. Nobody is saying that, hey, these are illegal people, but why are you letting them do it? Because you know that they are doing it for survival, right? And you know that they are going to fill up your jails, like, Gandhi did. Say, okay, we will go fill up your jails. Why is the state allowing these millions of people from Raniganj to Ranchi to dig illegal coal? Because state at the back of its mind knows that it is a question of subsistence for them. It's a question of survival for them. And that is why we need now to give recognition to that and move these people away out of coal reliance, and move them into other forms of economies. And it would require a concerted effort. It's not going to be done by the effort of one group or the other. It requires understanding of the problem, the nature of the problem, the real nature of the beast that we are dealing with, and dealing with it in an open and honest manner. So that's all I had to say, really. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening to me for nearly 50 minutes with so much patience. And I'm happy to take questions from you. Thank you very much. I think Priyanshu wants to ask a question.
Yeah. Now participants are allowed to unmute themselves. Hi. Yeah, Priyanshu, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, now I can.
Okay.
Sorry
Yeah,
for
yeah.
this.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, ma'am, thanks for this excellent talk, and I truly enjoyed. I have been following your work for quite some time, so I really appreciate your work in this space. So one question I have, and so in your characterization of national coal, neoliberal coal, and informal coal. So I know conceptually these categories make a lot of sense, but I'm somehow unable to fathom the recent developments of the last 5 years, where basically 90% of India's coal has been allocated to what can be called national coal. These are basically state government companies, but eventually it ends up uh, uh, controlled by big conglomerates like Adani, right? For instance, Adani now, even though it was never allotted a single mine, it now constitutes almost 120 million tons of capacity, which is as much as what SECL built over the last 40 years. And these are through what are called contractors. So which so while we can say this is a formal contract, hello, yeah, yeah, and so and yeah. So
Can you
what I was
type
saying
the
is, if
question?
this recent development, allocated national coal.
Can you type the question in the chat box, Priyanshu? Cutting off.
Sure, ma'am.
Yeah.
Sure, ma'am.
And
Thank you.
yeah, in the meantime, can we have any other questions? Please don't, this is called the awkward silence. It's the most awkward moment for a speaker when there is no no one.
Yeah,
Hello,
I had one question.
Sure.
So yeah. So you have often talked about how the burden of transition falls disproportionately on women,
Yeah.
and I was wondering how what form this burden takes for decarbonization, a movement out of coal, and if it's specific to coal as such, or it's a more common phenomena for any natural resources.
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Titir. And you have allowed me to talk about gender, which is, I think men and women have, societally ascribed roles in most societies, in almost all societies. These are different roles. Men and women generally play different roles, but also they play some roles that are, the overlapping. Okay, and the problem is not in that. The problem is that the roles that women play are seen as less, seen as something that are unimportant. Why? Because you think about that, what are the roles that women play? Women play caring roles. Women are usually looking after children, provide, procuring the food and cooking it, organizing the household, looking after the elderly, looking after the sick, and so on. Even if women work outside of home, this is the kind of work that often women are expected to do. No matter what the society is, it can be India, it can be Australia, it can be America. You would see that eh, almost everywhere that's what is happening. And because the problem is, as I said, that the work that women do is, part of that iceberg which is underneath the water that cannot be seen. You're looking at the only monetized economy, that tip of the iceberg, the big part of the iceberg that's underneath, we don't get to see. But in spite of all the work that women do, women do not generally own the resources, modes of production. How difficult it is for women who are men and women, both illiterate, for example. The land they own is owned by the man, and they go to a bank. Who will get the credit? The man. These are the basic problems uh, that occur in gender relations. As a result, burden of change, burden of always on women. There is growing literature that is showing that uh, energy change, climate justice, climate change, the burden is falling on women. And in case of mine closure, when new mines come in, their women's lives completely change. And when the mines close, women's lives change as well. That's the fantastic thing, that we never thought about that. There is evidence now, and from UK, for example, in England, where mines closed, there's evidence that women's lives were more impacted. So you would say that that's a developed country, United Kingdom. But how come women educated, men and women both go to school? How come women were more impacted? There's evidence now coming from Romania, Eastern European country. Women are not probably as forward as as progressive as in the United Kingdom. But women got more impacted in Romania as well, in Poland, in Germany. All the coal mines were in the eastern part. And when the mines were closed, in absolutely women's lives became hell. Domestic violence increased, for example. Domestic violence increased. Women had to provide. When children cry for food, imagine who do they go to? They go to the mother, and the mother will have to provide the basic subsistence food. But father is seen as the food provider, right? So gender is at the heart of this justice. When we talk about social transition has to be just. transition to decarbonization has to be just. We need to think holistically. Now I can see Priyangshu's question. Priyangshu, I'll read it out for everyone. You said that, is this from you? Over last 5 years, 90% of India's coal capacity is allocated to what is national coal. Yes, government PSUs, who then contract mining to big conglomerates like Adani. See, this is another way private and public are kind of overlapping, right? Really, it just supports my diverse economy thesis. Supposedly for captive mining, the contract terms being quite unavailable in the public domain. Me and Anuj, another colleague in IIMC, have filed over 70 RTIs, and then they are allowed to sell it in. Did you get any result from the RTIs? Then they are allowed to sell it in open market despite allocation being captive mining. Unbelievable. And there is a litany of subcontractors and also some informal contractors just to sell coal waste. Yeah, it's a different kind of informality controlled by neoliberal economy. Absolutely. Yeah, totally agree. So the conceptual distinction of formal, informal, national, liberal, yeah, seems unable. Yeah, would you, Priyanshu, would you send me an email, personal email? We need to do a paper on this topic. Really, this moves on my idea of diverse economy. Absolutely agree. Fantastic.
Sure, ma'am. I'll write to you. Thank you.
Let's explore this problem a little deeply, and also how much of the contractors, we need to look at this whole subcontracting arrangement. That's the problem. You are spot on. That's where much of the problem lies. This is like the way the insurance industry, for example, in America works like that, that the front. So what is Coal India has become, Coal India CIL has become a frontispiece, a front man, respectable front man. And then underneath it is all these processes that are happening that we do not see, right? Any other questions?
Yeah. Hi, hi, ma'am. This is Shalendra Kumar.
Yes.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Hello,
Yeah.
Shailendra.
So, hi. Thank you for this talk. What brought me here is I'm from strategy department, but I'm also from Dhanbad. I was so I first 20 years of my life I have spent around coal mines. So I
You
wanted to
lived
see
with the
how
coal
a
dust and the
scholar looks at my place. Sorry.
yes. I said, and you grew up with the coal dust and the smoke.
Yeah. So my house was the isolated house, circumscribed by four open cast mines. So that way. So I have seen this subsistence coal very closely. Okay. My question is that in this transition, do we have a model either overseas in other economies or in other sectors from which we can draw lessons for this just transition?
Yeah, good question. Okay. So you would say that models are so far, Europe cannot be our model. I agree. This is why you are asking me. The concept is coming from Europe, which has understood the importance of climate change, where the Arctic is melting. One can now take a boat and go into the Arctic in summertime. You probably have heard that. So then Russia, Sweden, all America, everybody is now trying to dig the floor of Arctic, really, where they are hoping to get a lot of mineral resources and so on. So Europe understands the importance of climate change, and they are decarbonizing. It's written in their country, almost all EU's country policies and all that. There is a concerted effort by the banks, as I said, European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, EBRD, and CDC is working, another British-based bank come think tank. They are working with actually and in India as well. The problem that is that my that I would like to say that the way they have decarbonized in Europe, rampant coal mine closures and putting in money, who will get the money in India? Coal India employees, captive, the private coal companies employees, because they are the wage laborers. We also have a daily wage worker, informal sector, that about which we do not know. Contractors will say that we have become, we do not have work. So, oh, haath dhoke baith padega. And then where will these millions of people, we are really talking about huge numbers. So we have two options. We have to look at other countries uh, with equivalent economies. And I will come to that. There is a model. And the second one is we have to create our own model. And I think the path that India needs to follow would be somewhere in between. And what would be that? What is the other country? South Africa. South Africa, there is a vast vast area like our, as I was saying, Ranchi, Ranigans to Ranchi, that tract. They have an area called Mapalanga, where situation is that young people, when they, young people, there's absolutely no jobs, total unemployment. Unemployment rate is very high. Young people wake up in the morning and they go out of the house and they say, we are going to do zama zama. Zama zama is in Afrikaans, it's hustling basically, doing informal stuff, this and that. And they, kuch to kar lenge, like that in Hindi. They go out of house and they dig coal and they sell it. And that way they earn, say, maybe $5 US dollars worth of money, which is good money for South African context. And then it is the survival coal equivalent in South Africa. So what's happening in South Africa? First of all, there is no illegalization. There are lots of community groups like groundwork. There is a community, I have been speaking with them. Groundwork is working with these people. There are trade unions which are acutely aware of the need for just transition. In India, trade unions are still, you know, they have not become aware of where the world is going or will go in 10 years down the track. The idea of this idea of coal mining, that coal mining will stop, and that trade unions will need to play an important role in that decarbonization process. They need to be first aware, they need to strategize, and then work with the workers to find a way. And the third is the bureaucrats. We have a huge bureaucrats and local politicians. They need to understand that whatever strategy they follow, they will have to talk with the local communities and work in consonance with the local communities, in conjunction with the local communities, to create that alternative, the vision, an alternative vision for the future. Currently in India, we do not have a vision. We're just talking about just transition at the Delhi scale, Delhi level. If you see, CSE has carried out a study of two mines that were closed for being uneconomic. And CSE is, say, chutkara lekar chala gaya. He has opened his own think tank, an NGO. It's called iForest. Chandra Bhushan. He has also, sponsored a study. So Terry has carried out a study, and iForest have carried out a study, and CSE is currently carrying out a study. So this is the uh, scenario. But you will hear more about just transition in near future. Why I wanted to talk to you about is that you need to know what is going wrong and what way to think about it. So you are intelligent people, you will know what is justice. You know, what would be justice in a decarbonized world to these millions of people. We cannot just throw them outside. You know, it's not that, you know, we are running on a, you know, jumping on a train, and we just not, these people are not human beings. We're throwing them out of that train, you know, onto the tracks. We can't do that. You know, we got to find something that is good for them, that they want. So what is their conception of justice? We need to find out. Okay.
Thank you. That was helpful.
I think there is one more question in the chat window.
Yeah. Okay. I had not seen that. Sorry. Who is it from? Is it
This is
Ruchira?
by Kranti. Kranti.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Coming from public policy background, I think the language game must change in India. Um, Keeping environment and climate change in mind. Yeah, absolutely. You know, Prantik, an interesting thing, India is producing a lot of renewable energy. India is talking about renewable energy all the time. So, but if you look at its actual actions, you would see coal mining is increasing in amount. India has an active interest in coal, not only within the country, but also outside. So Indian money is going abroad. So for example, Tata Power Company, TPC has bought up one-third share of an Indonesian company, which is operating in Borneo Island, Kalimantan, which is called Kalimantan Island, on the equatorial, you know, dense equatorial forest. You know, you think about Borneo, you think about the fierce Dayak communities, you know, who headhunters and so on. So that's where that company is digging for coal, and that Tata bought it up one-third share with the contract that they will, entire coal will come to India. So I have written a paper recently, published a paper with a group of colleagues, which is saying that India's coal geography is changing. So formerly we used to think about coal, wherever coal was produced, the thermal power plants were located on the coal tracts, and we carried the electricity to other places via transmission lines. But now you will see that increasingly new coal power plants are coming up along the coast. So India's coal is becoming coastal. So this is a new coastal geography that's evolving in India. And you know why? That much of these uh, coastal power plants most of them rely on imported coal. India is investing in coal mining in Zambia, in South Africa, in Mozambique. We are not. So this is the situation now. Yeah, the PESA and the, yeah, FRA. Do you find India's framework for managing and educating? Yeah, the less said about the way India has managed human rights, you know, the way India has protected its poor and weaker and indigenous people. The less said about it, the better. As you know, that's why you have asked me the question. The human rights record in mining tracts have been very poor. Actually, CSE came out with this publication quite a few years ago, at least 8, 10 years ago now. It's called Rich Lands, Poor People. And it showed with maps that wherever minerals are found in India, those minerals occur under the land that was owned by indigenous people. With coal, the situation is those are inalienable lands. The situation is worse because the CBAA, Coal Bearing Areas Act, is then invoked to alienate, take over that land. But there's also other issues. Oftentimes indigenous people have lived and used the lands for generations, but those lands have not been correctly, accurately recorded in their names. So land records, revenue survey records do not show indigenous people as owners of those lands. So that's another problem. So then that those lands become gair majurwa, without a deed, you know, uh, gair majurwa, without a deed. So that means that land belongs to the state, although it has been generationally, customarily used by indigenous people. So in India, we have never uh, thought about indigenous people's rights. We do not even have an indigenous people. We have all we have is scheduled tribes, right? So India, who are these scheduled tribes? They are indigenous people. But that's the nomenclature we have chosen to follow. Yeah. Thanks. That's a good question. So I don't see any other question now.
Yeah, I guess there aren't any more questions. So we can end the session if there aren't any more questions.
Okay, just as we said,
There's-
there's few
yeah, there's
questions. Yeah, I mean, if Coal India Limited, which is a state-owned company, that can't look after it, the people in their own land, then how can these private companies that are owned by, individuals that are profit oriented, would be able to do that? Would be able to look after even people? That's the worry. Coal India, think about it. How did Coal India Limited look after people before? So when Coal India Limited acquired a piece of land, it gave a job in return. But that system, it's called, land job for compensation, on compensation for the land, because it's Coal India Limited understood that they are taking the livelihood of that family away from that family, so they provided them with something. But that is also gone. Even Coal India Limited offers very few jobs nowadays. So jobs are not coming plenty. The new type of mining, the open cut mines, also do not require a lot of jobs. So only educated, well trained, skilled people are coming from overseas. So yes, I don't think the way coal commercialization has been taking place will address any of the social issues. And what's more is that the control by the state on businesses, on these industrial houses, is very low at the moment. The state doesn't look after its own citizens that well, but it facilitates the expansion by the businesses. So that's a problem. It's going to be a very serious problem in future. Thank you.
in case there aren't any more questions, I think we can end the session here. Thank you, ma'am, for this beautiful talk. We got to learn a lot from this. And thank you for taking so many questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Titir. Thank you to all the IIM PhD students for inviting me to give this talk. It was a pleasure, and I have been working on it. It wasn't hard for me at all. Then I'm so glad to meet Priyanshu again and to meet all of you here. Thank you.